Such has been the tradition for many a century, as the following proverb from the Buddhist Jataka tales shows. A king many centuries ago was exasperated by one of his ministers. Whenever a matter for discussion came up at court, this minister would interrupt and begin a monologue, which always seemed to go on forever. No one, not even the king, could get a word in. Furthermore, what the minister had to say was even more uninteresting than the inside of a ping-pong ball. After yet another unproductive session, the king sought peace in his garden, away from the frustration of court politics. In the public part of his garden, he spotted a small group of children laughing excitedly as they gathered around a middle-aged disabled man who was sitting on the ground. The children gave the man a few coins, pointed to a small leafy tree, and asked him for a chicken. The man took out a bag of small stones and a pea shooter, and began to fire the stones at the tree. He stripped leaf after leaf off the small tree with rapid-fire shots from his pea shooter. In an incredibly short time and with flawless accuracy, he shaped the tree like a rooster. The children gave him some more money, pointed to a large bush, and asked for an elephant. The disabled marksman soon sculpted the bush with his pea shooter into the form of an elephant. As the children applauded, the king had an idea. The king went up to the disabled man and offered to make him rich beyond his wildest dreams, if only he would help with an irritating little problem. The king whispered something into the man's ear. The man nodded in agreement, and the king smiled for the first time in weeks. The following morning, court began as usual. Nobody took much notice of the new curtain along one of the walls. The government was to discuss another increase in taxes. No sooner had the king announced the agenda than the manic-mouthed minister began his harangue. As he opened his mouth, he felt something small and soft hit the back of his throat and fall down into his stomach. He carried on speaking. A few seconds later, something small and soft entered his mouth again. He gulped it down mid-sentence and continued his speech. Again and again he had to swallow during his speech, but such irritations were not going to stop what he had to say. After half an hour of determined lecturing, gulping down whatever it was every few seconds, he was feeling very, very queasy. But such was his stubbornness that he would not stop his oratory. After another few minutes his face was a sickly green colour, his stomach was turning with nausea, and finally he had to stop speaking. With one hand holding his sickly stomach and another pressed hard against his mouth to stop something nasty coming out, he desperately sought the nearest washroom. The delighted king went over to the curtain and drew it back to reveal the disabled man, who had been hiding behind the curtain with his pea shooter and a bag of ammunition. The king shook helplessly with laughter as he saw the huge and now almost empty bag of ammunition, chicken shit pellets, that had been projected with devastating accuracy into that poor minister's gullet. That minister did not return to the court for several weeks. It was remarkable how much business was completed during his absence. Then when he did return, he would hardly say a word, and when he did speak, he would always raise his right hand in front of his mouth. Perhaps in our parliaments of today, the presence of such a sharpshooter would help get more business done. Author's note. This story is based on Jataka, story number 107. The Talkative Tortoise. Maybe we should learn silence early in our life. It might help us avoid much of the trouble later on. I tell the following story to visiting children on the vital importance of keeping quiet. In a lake in the mountains a long time ago there lived a talkative tortoise. Whenever he met any of the animals that shared his waterside home, he would talk to them so much and for so long, without any pauses, that his listeners became bored, then bothered, then annoyed. They often wondered how Talkative Tortoise was able to talk so long without taking a breath. They thought he must have been breathing through his ears, since he never used them for listening. He was such a torturing talkative tortoise that rabbits would suddenly dive into their holes, birds would fly to the tops of the trees, and fish would hide behind rocks whenever they saw a talkative tortoise approaching. They knew that they would be stuck there for hours if Talkative Tortoise started talking to them. Talkative Tortoise was actually quite lonely. Every year in the summer, a pair of magnificent white swans would come on vacation to the mountain lake. They were kind because they let Talkative Tortoise talk to them as much as he liked, or perhaps they knew they would only be visiting for a couple of months. Talkative Tortoise adored the company of the swans. He would talk to them until the stars ran out of twinkle, and the swans would always listen patiently. When summer was fading and the days became cold, the swans prepared to go home. Talkative Tortoise began to cry. He hated the cold and the loss of his friends. "If only I could go with you," he sighed. "Sometimes, when the snow covers the slopes and my lake ices over, I feel so cold and alone. We tortoises cannot fly, and if I were to walk, by the time I got even a little way, it would be time to come back. Tortoises walk slowly." The compassionate swans were touched by the sadness in Talkative Tortoise, so they made him an offer. "Dear Tortoise, don't cry. We can take you with us, if you can keep only one promise." "Yes, yes, I promise," said Talkative Tortoise excitedly, though he did not know what he had to promise yet. "We tortoises always keep our promises. In fact, I remember promising to Rabbit to try and be quiet only a few days ago after I told him all about the different types of tortoise shells, and—" 1 hour later, when Talkative Tortoise stopped talking and the swans could speak again, they said, "Tortoise, you must promise to keep your mouth shut." "Easy," said Talkative Tortoise. "In fact, we tortoises are well known for keeping our mouths shut. We hardly ever speak at all. I was explaining this to a fish just